Hello, this is Dave Redder, and this is part 3 of calling PHP API functions from jQuery Ajax. And we've seen two pieces so far, and one of them had to do with simply trying to understand what was going on with regard to doing the APIs. And the last one looked into the business of how we go about doing this part right here, and how we go about making this happen right here. These values are coming straight from this table, and this table is coming straight from a MySQL database on a remote system. So with that in mind, I think I'll go this time and describe what we're doing to cause this thing to happen. And you'll notice that when we pick, for example, unused, we say that we want to put in some sweet potatoes, and we want it to be 2 feet in length, 12 feet wide, at position 0, 0 in the unused section. Click on Insert, and it does what we asked. It inserted this value. You'll notice that that doesn't show here, but if you look up here, you'll see that the sweet potatoes are in here. We can click on Show Gardens again to refresh this list, and when we do, we see the sweet potatoes. So we understand the whole business about how to make an Ajax call. We understand how to get a callback function specified and called. We understand how to write the PHP API. And so this is just a matter of showing in specifics about how to deal with insert. So let's take a look. This is the HTML file. And you can see that I've got a button here for insert, which simply calls the insert garden method. Insert garden is in the Ajax garden JavaScript file, and I've got showing here the pieces for insert garden. By the way, I'm using NetBeans here, and I've decided to put these pieces of code. Here's the get gardens from the one of the previous videos, and here's show gardens from a previous video, and I'm just putting this kind of tag around there, this editor fold comment actually, and it allows me to fold these things up like you see right here. So that's all that's happened with that. So let's take a look at insert garden. Basically, it's just a matter of retrieving the information that is on the form, on the HTML form, and being able to grab that information, send it via Ajax over to the PHP file by using a post, and letting the PHP file do what we want to do. In this case, what we want it to do is to insert a garden based on the data that we've got on this HTML file, and then return back when it's done to do this insert, and or to inform us about the insert, which is this file right here. And so with regard to insert, there's not a lot of information that comes back. We get indication of success, and there's other information that you can grab if you want. For example, I have it send back the query string that was used to do it, and that's more of a developer kind of a thing, because I want to be able to see that the query string that I generate is in fact the one that I thought I was generating. And so this is useful for development time. This is probably not something that you're going to show your users unless they just happen to be interested in it. Again, remember that I got the credentials back on one of these and commented how bad of an idea that is, and that's really not something you'd really want to do. I did it for development purposes there as well, and so you'll notice that that is not part of this JavaScript. And really, I should remove that from the PHP file as well, but that's another story. So take a look at this. What have we got? The main thing that we've got is the business of wanting to have the parent ID here instead of the name of the parent garden instead of the number of the parent garden, the ID of the parent garden. But I need the ID to come back so that I can get that value to look up things with later. That's the thing I want to store in this field right here. This is the ID of the garden, and this is the parent ID. In other words, the cucumber garden is in the main garden, because that 2 matches that 2, and that's the main garden. On the other hand, the white potato garden is within the potatoes garden, and the Roma tomatoes garden is within the tomatoes garden. So the goal is to be able to display the string that represents the garden to the user. Let the user select that garden, the sprouts garden, for example, and then when we select this, when we do the insert, we'll know which one is selected, and we'll be able to say, well, I want to get that ID for that garden rather than the name of the garden. And this is how it's done. It's done right. It's done right here. This is in the JavaScript, and as we've done before, we've actually gone to get. Well, actually, we haven't gone to do that yet because we haven't looked at this one yet. But what we're doing is we're grabbing the values that are in these fields, the parent ID field, or the parent field, the name, width, length, X position, and Y position fields, and we're going to grab those values and we're going to put them in variables here. So I've created local variables here, parent ID, name, width, length, X position, Y position, and I'm going to populate those with values. The value I want in these guys, name, is from the field that I select using jQuery, the field that is the one with ID name. Here's the one with width, length, and so forth. So I'm really not doing a whole lot of depth here. I mean, I've got, go get the tag, or the field, if you will, that has the ID of name, and grab its value and store it in name. That's it. This one is a little bit different because there are a lot of things that are in this ID parent, which is a select tag, but the one I want is the one that is the option that's selected. And so that's what I'm going for. I want to get that value that is the option that's selected, and that's going to return the selected value, and I'm going to grab that value, stringify it, run it through JSON, and put that in parent ID. So what I've got now is these values in here that represent the values in here. And when I send this off via ajax to the other side, the values it's going to get are these, and those in fact are returned from the API. This entire string is that query string that's returned from the API. And so you can see that I did have 6 for the sprout or whatever menu that was. It was the unused menu. I had sweet potatoes in the name. I had 12 and 2 for the width and length. I had 0, 0 for the X and Y positions. And so this stuff right here came straight out of here. And this statement here is the thing that we have to create over in the PHP file. So let's go take a look at what happens. Very much the same kind of thing we saw with get gardens, but instead we're having another call to an insert garden method for Ajax. We're sending it the name of the method in the PHP file that we want to call, and we're sending it the values in the parameters that we need to have to call that method. These values are going to get posted to this file right here. Oops. This file right here, shadyapi.php. And we're going to deal with them as we dealt with the post for just the method name before. So we'll go look at those details. The difference here is that instead of just having the method being passed, we also want to pass all these values, which are passed from here into here, and then demonstrated in the data as you see right there. So parent ID is parent ID, and you can use different naming conventions if you would like. This is just an easy one. You don't have to think very hard to make this one happen, but you do have to think about the difference between this parent ID and this one. This is the value that you're going to refer to as the name of the posted object that you want to get, and this is the value that's going to be associated with that posted value. All right, so we call Ajax insert garden, and it executes this ajax call. This ajax call then calls shady API, which is right here, with a post and those arguments. So let's go take a look at it. Shady API. And get closing up on that, and let me look at insert garden. Looks a little bit like the previous one, but let's take a look up here first. Notice that this statement has not changed. It works for whatever function we pass in that say we want to execute. And if you'll recall, over here in this, we said we wanted to execute insert garden. Passed it in as method, passed it out as method. And so over here, the method value is the function that we're going to call. And as you can see, that was insert garden. So over here, it's going to be insert garden. And insert garden is going to be, let me hide those. Okay, so I'm sorry. So insert garden is going to be the value of this string. Insert garden paren is going to cause this method, insert garden, to get executed. So what do? Well, I'm actually going to go get all of those values, and I'm going to sanitize them, decode them because they were encoded as JSON from the call, and I'm going to store the result of that lookup in the post array in a variable called $parent_id. So once again, we've come here, we've got these values that were these are the names, or the IDs, I mean, of the HTML tags that contain the values we want: parent, name, width, length, and so forth. We did we found that and got its value, that tag, and got its value. Here we found the tag and got the selected value. We stringify those values in JSON and send it down here and call the ajax function. The stringify is the reason that, I'm sorry, the JSON stringify, yes, is the reason that we need to JSON decode this thing to get this value. So that's the parent ID. It's going to be the ID of the garden that's going to be the parent of this garden. Here's the name, same thing. Width, same thing. Length, X position, X, Y, or Y position, all the same things. And with that, we get to this point, and now we have all of those values that we said we wanted to put into the database, into the rect garden table. We do the same thing we did before. We make a connection to the database using these server value or server methods. I'm sorry, the API methods. It's in that function right there, demo credentials. And it looks like this, if you'll recall. It's just got different values in there. And I do this little check to see if the thing connected. If it didn't, then I die. Connected, failed, and here's the connect error. But ignoring that, let's look at this. What I want to do is I want to come up with that statement that you're looking at right there. Well, for this particular table, this is always going to be the same. Insert into rect garden, parent ID, name, width, length, X position, Y position, because those are the names of those fields in the database, as you can see. ID, parent ID, name, width, length, X position, Y position. And recall that this is an auto increment field, the ID field, so we don't provide that for an entry addition, an insert of an entry into this table. That's why it's not here, because it's an auto ID. The database manager will create that value for us when the time comes. So there are the names of these fields, and these are the values that I want to put in them. These have to be in the same order as those, as you probably know. And while some database systems allow you to put numeric values in quotes, I don't think they all do. And in any case, I like this to all look pretty much the same. This is the only one that's an actual string, so I put these apostrophes around it. But the other guys, I just put these out here so that it looks like the same thing. It's maybe a little inefficient, and I really don't care about that because it's really pretty quick anyway. So by the time I get to here, to this statement right there, this query, this insert into instruction SQL command is ready to go. We have that thing built. And you can see that because that's what came back from it. And if you look at the code here, you'll see that there's no changes to that value, this $query value, anywhere in the code from there. So no changes have happened. That's all we do to create this, and we store it then in this query variable. I make a connection, or use the connection that we created up here, and call the query on that command, and then I build an object to return. And the object that I'm going to return is in fact this object, standard class object, built up with a query string and whether or not the thing was successful. If result has something in it or is true, then it was successful. I return, or I JSON encode this return value, which returns it up to here. This echoes it, and that gets it back to here. I have this method called the callback, which we specified right here. And we come back to this, and the callback returns these values, which I use to display in the results section of the bottom of that page. But otherwise, I just specify to go get the new gardens and run with it. So let's go look at it happen again. Let me reload just so you can see that we're starting from scratch. I want to go into the potato or the tomatoes garden, and I'm going to put better boy tomatoes in there, a width of 12. And right now, by the way, I'm really not quite sure what section, how big the tomatoes section is. So I can show the gardens if I want. And I've got tomatoes, and it's 12 by 10. I'm using 12 by 3, so I think I'll use 12 wide by 3 again. And this time I'm going to start at the X position at 0, Y position at 3, because I've already used 3 feet up there. Whatever, that's not important for this, but just showing you that you can open this while you're doing this and everything works fine. I click on Insert. Here's the string that we got. I put this in the tomato section, or the tomato garden, and the tomato garden is 8. That's pretty cool. If I wanted, I could put something in the Better Boy garden. I could say, well, I'm going to put some early girls in there just for the fun of it. And I'm going to do a width of 3 and a length of 3 at 0 and position of 6, let's say, because I want to put one early girl plant in. I'm going to click on Insert, and now you can see that this early girl plant will go in garden number 95, which isn't showing here, but if I show gardens again, there it is. I've got the Better Boys, and everything's working just as we would expect. I can go back here and check to see if all that happened by really reloading this. I think it's working on it. Well, we'll come back and see if that's working. And we're done. So there's one thing that's different that I want to mention to you, and that it's not really different, but it's something I promised I would tell you about. And it's this value called, in Get Gardens, let's go up here and look at Get Gardens. It's this async value. This says whether or not to do the call asynchronously. And I've chosen to not do these calls asynchronously because I expect the tables to get updated immediately. Let's see if this happened yet. I don't know what's going on there. So we'll worry about that later. And to do that, let me look at this. I need to be able to hit this insert button, cause something to happen, and immediately see that I've got the thing there. Otherwise, I'd have to wait. And it turns out when you do some waiting that things don't work exactly like you would expect. So you might want to play with that, looking at the current, what you think the current version is and what it really is. Because if this comes back as insert into, then it got inserted. That's because it says true, it was successful, and you can be confident that that got inserted. Okay, so that's all I have for this series of videos right now. I may put another one out for doing updates, but I'm going to wait. I think you should try to do updates yourself. And updates a little bit more difficult to think about. But if you go look at W3 Schools or someplace like that and look at the structure of the update command or the update SQL command, and try to think your way through what that might be like, that could be useful. So with that said, I'm done with this series until maybe I do something else with it later, but for the moment this one is considered complete. I hope it was useful to you. Enjoy your work.